Hello friend, thanks for joining me for another book chat. Today let's spend some time with Death Comes to Pemberley by P.D. James. This book was originally published back in 2011, and I believe this was P.D. James's last novel that she published before her death. I decided to read it because this was in a book exchange. My apartment has this book exchange down in this shared space we have down in kind of the lobby. And I saw it there, and since I love Jane Austen characters, I thought this would be a fun read, and so I decided to give it a go. And yeah, I had fun with it. This is a murder mystery, so I'm going to be careful to not give away any spoilers or anything that I think would detract from a first-time reader's experience with Death Comes to Pemberley. So I'm going to be careful about that. So I mentioned Jane Austen a bit ago. This novel is set at Pemberley, and yes, Pemberley from Pride and Prejudice. And I have chatted Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen here on my channel. I will link to that chat down in the description below. But just to recap, for those who are not familiar with Pride and Prejudice, Pemberley is the manor house and estate of Mr. Darcy. So the story of this novel picks up about 6 years from the events of Pride and Prejudice. And at this point, Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth are married, and they've been married about 6 years, and they've settled into this comfortable life at Pemberley. They have a couple of kids who they dote on. They're happy. Elizabeth's father, Mr. Bennet, visits quite frequently. And they live not too far from Elizabeth's sister, Jane, who you may remember from Pride and Prejudice, married Charles Bingley, who was Mr. Darcy's best friend. So we have Mr. Darcy living near his best friend and Elizabeth living near her dear sister, Jane. And they also have a couple of kids, so they interact with each other quite frequently. Mr. Darcy's sister, Georgiana, also lives with them there at Pemberley, and she has a serious suitor for marriage, which she seems to be happy about. So all generally speaking, appears to be going well, peaceful and well at Pemberley. So the manor house is buzzing as the novel opens with excitement because they're planning an annual ball that Pemberley gives for the county, and it is basically the event of the year for this community. And so the attention of the house is on this ball. Now, those familiar with Pride and Prejudice, the book, may remember that Elizabeth's younger sister, Lydia, and Mr. Wickham, a man who we learned in Pride and Prejudice, has boyhood ties to Pemberley. Anyway, as Pride and Prejudice ends, it's obvious that Lydia and Mr. Wickham probably aren't going to be welcome and well received at Pemberley, and that is the case. They are not received there. However, on the eve of the big ball, right at the beginning of the novel, in the night, this sort of dark and stormy night, a carriage comes careening up to Pemberley, to the house, and a hysterical Lydia gets out of the carriage screaming insensibly that Mr. Wickham has been murdered. So that sets us up for the story that we're going to have in the book. The reader then goes on this journey of discovery along with all the characters of Pemberley. First of all, since Lydia's making no sense, the first thing appears to be who, who was murdered, if anyone. So figuring out what actually happened, or who is our first task, and then we proceed on to the what, when, where, and whys in the book. And needless to say, though, that a monkey wrench has been thrown into the ball, the plans for the ball the next day, as well as in the peaceful lives of the residents of Pemberley and the nearby community. So that's sort of the description of what happened, or that's what sets us up for this story. The adventure that we're going to go on is, of course, figuring all of this out. So in reading the reviews, just some thoughts about the book. In reading the reviews, the most common criticism that I saw is that this was just glorified fan fiction. And, yeah, it kind of is. It's because it's the characters from Pride and Prejudice. So there are some new characters, like, for example, some of the house servants that are not, we didn't meet any of those in Pride and Prejudice. So there's some new characters here, but for the most part, the main characters are characters we know from Pride and Prejudice. So, but I think P.D. James, I think that this was actually, to me, this was the fun of reading it. It's actually why I read it, was because I thought, let's just see what a murder mystery with these characters would be like. And so P.D. James actually says in an author's note in the beginning of the book here, she says, I owe an apology to the shade of Jane Austen for involving her beloved Elizabeth in the trauma of a murder investigation. No doubt she would have replied to my apology by saying that, had she wished to dwell on such odious subjects, she would have written this story herself and done it better. So I think P.D. James approached this as a person who really deeply loves Jane Austen's story, Jane Austen, and the Jane Austen world that was created. And so to me, she does a reverent sort of take on this, and it was fun. And to me, reading this novel, it actually enriched my understanding of the characters of Pride and Prejudice. It didn't detract from them. So in that sense, I would say that if it is considered fan fiction, to me it was really well done fan fiction. In reading this, I also recognized not only obvious connections and references to Pride and Prejudice all over the place, but also references to Emma and Persuasion. So I wonder if there may have been any others in there that I didn't catch. I wouldn't be surprised. So if anybody caught anything, has read this and has caught anything else, I would love to hear about it down in the details below. But, just a couple of favorite quotes from this book. The first one's from Lady Catherine. I always get such a kick out of the character of Lady Catherine. She's one of the funniest characters, I think, in Pride and Prejudice. Although, she's actually pretty severe, so she's not exactly a comedic character intentionally, but somehow I get amused by her with her opinionated bossiness. And she says, at one point, the blacksmith's second son has been reputedly dying for the last 4 years. Yet when I drive past, I see him assisting his father with every appearance of being in robust health. The de Burghs have never gone in for prolonged dying. People should make up their minds whether to live or to die, and do one or the other with the least inconvenience to others. Lady Catherine, it doesn't dawn on her aristocratic self that perhaps the blacksmith's son has to work, regardless of if he's ill, he has to work right up until he dies. Lady Catherine doesn't see this, and she thinks it's in bad taste to keep living. Either die or live, one or the other, but don't try to do both. Oh, yeah, it was pretty funny. The book, opens on a really hopeful, optimistic, sort of a Jane Austen kind of mood, and it closes with the same thing. And I'll finish up this chat with a quote that I really liked from Elizabeth. She's talking to Mr. Darcy, her husband, here towards the end of the book, and she says, she moved closer to him, and for a moment they sat in silence. She said, we are neither of us the people we were then. Let us look on the past only as it gives us pleasure, and to the future with confidence and hope. I love that. I think it's such a great quote. Looking on the past, only on the good things in the past, since they can't be changed, and looking to the future with optimism. Beautiful quote. Love it. I had so much fun reading this book. I breezed right through it. It's quite a pretty easy read, but the mystery itself takes many, many twists and turns, and I didn't figure it out, but I never do. I'm a terrible detective. I never figure out mysteries beforehand. But nevertheless, it was a lot of fun to read, and the resolution. I said it sort of builds on the characters of Pride and Prejudice in to me, a logical way, and a really believable way. So how the characters wind up at the end of the book versus where they were at the beginning of the book, some make pretty significant life changes. And to me, it all kind of fit with the mood and the characters from Pride and Prejudice, the Jane Austen Pride and Prejudice. So anyway, fun read for me, and glad I went ahead and picked that up down in the book exchange. My next chat is going to be, let me just pull up the cover, changing gears a bit into some Haruki Murakami, the Wind-Up Bird Chronicle. I have finished this already, and I will have a chat on it coming up soon. So until next time, take care.